Welcome to the New York Business Leaders Podcast, presented by the Coyle Group. We interview the most interesting and influential business leaders in New York and hear their stories of success, challenges, and lessons learned while building their businesses and personal brands. New episodes drop weekly, so please be sure to subscribe to get updates in your favorite stream. Without further delay, here's your host of the New York Business Leaders Podcast, Gordon Coyle.
Welcome back to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Gordon Coyle. In today's episode, we chat with Rob Levin, who's currently operating two firms, Work Better Now and the Oasis Strategy Group. I'm going to let Rob describe what these businesses do and how we got into them during our interview. Now, if Rob's name is familiar, but you just can't place where you've heard it before, he was the founder and publisher of the New York Enterprise Report, which was a popular magazine a few years ago, published weekly and focused on businesses in New York City. Rob's a real entrepreneur with an interesting background and career to match, and I think you're going to enjoy this show. Now, before we begin this conversation, I just want to thank you for listening and ask that if you haven't subscribed or rated the show, please hit that subscribe button and rate this podcast on the platform you're listening to it on. Lastly, if you have an interesting story and would like to tell it on this podcast, let me know. Drop me an email, which I'll have in the show notes for you. Thanks. Now, on to the show. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I'm Gordon Coyle. Welcome to the show, to the New York Business Leaders Podcast. Today, I've got Rob Levin, who's a really interesting character with me. He's got a couple of businesses we're going to talk about. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Gordon. Really happy to be here and doing this with you.
Yeah, really happy that you are here and helping us kick off this series on success factors and business leaders in and around New York. Why don't you give the audience a couple of minutes on who you are, your background, and some of the things that you've already accomplished?
Sure. When I think about it, I have this really interesting, I was going to say weird, but I guess that's not ideal, background. I started my career, first of all, even go back, just a fun tidbit. In college, I promoted concerts for the college, including the Red Hot Chili Peppers, Bob Dylan, Cheap Trick. And I actually had offers to go into the music business, and I declined. I was an accounting major. So after graduation, I worked for, at the time, was one of the big six. I did that for 4 years, got my CPA and all of that stuff, went out to the West Coast, got my MBA, came back to New York. And then I ran a few businesses with roles from a CFO, COO, and then up to a CEO. And the last company that I was with, it didn't end well. There was some really bad things going on in the company. It was part of a small publicly traded UK company, and I left. And I decided, you know what, I'm never working for somebody again. And I started a business in 2003, one that I know you're familiar with, called the New York Enterprise Report. And in a way, similar to what you're doing now with this series. What I wanted to do was I wanted to help business owners, and I wanted to help them with inspiration through interviews with very successful business owners, as well as best practices and subject matter expertise from a very wide variety of experts. So I started the New York Enterprise Report in 2003, which was a website, a print magazine. At one point, we were publishing monthly. And then we did around a dozen events a year, including the Small Business Awards for the New York area. And it was a lot of fun. I met so many people, so many business owners, both well-known business owners, as well as, people that you and I interact with every day. An amazing experience, built a great team. It was really my first foray into entrepreneurship. And then, as the media business started to change, I ended up selling the business. I think it was the beginning of 2014. I kept a part of I kept our marketing arm, where we helped large companies market and sell to small businesses under the name RSL Media, which was really the parent company. I didn't sell that part when I sold the New York Enterprise Report. And I then grew that for a number of years, helping companies like SAP and Amazon Web Services and Spectrum and a pretty long list of companies in a lot of ways, mostly marketing, helping them really understand and finding the best ways and developing programs to help them market and sell to small and mid-sized businesses. Let's see, if we fast forward just a couple of years, I then started a couple of other businesses. So the one of which, and your firm helps us with the insurance for this one, Work Better Now. I co-founded that with a college buddy, Andrew Cohen. I think that was about 3 years ago. And what Work Better Now does, I guess we're going to get into that in a little bit, so I'll hold off on that. But that's kind of where I am today.
Okay, great.
Started with the New York Enterprise Report, and then have launched a couple of businesses since.
I didn't realize that New York Enterprise Report was your first entrepreneurial business. I thought maybe you had done something before that. How big was the circulation at that magazine?
The circulation, the print circulation was around 35,000, and then we did some, we had some research commissioned. It looked like our readership was about 100,000, which made us, I think, the largest regional business publication in the New York area.
Yeah, I'm sure that for anybody listening to this, they're probably familiar with that magazine and remember it pretty well. Because it touched on, like you said earlier, big businesses, but it also brought into the fold a lot of mid-market and smaller businesses that we all do business with and know the owners and leaders of. So, yeah, and I think that this podcast is kind of growing into that sort of mold of entrepreneurship, success factors, inspiration, all that sort of thing. At least that's what I'm hoping for.
Right. Well, thanks for keeping the flame going.
I didn't name it the New York Enterprise Podcast. So let's talk about the two companies that you do run today. Do you want to start with Oasis, or you want to start with Work Better Now? Up to you.
Let's start with Oasis. That's really where I spend most of my time today.
Okay.
So Oasis is an asset management company specializing in something called life settlements. So then the next question is, well, what are life settlements? I'll save you the question. Life settlements happen when somebody has a life insurance policy. It's usually a senior who has a life insurance policy that they no longer either want, no longer need, maybe no longer can afford. And a lot of people don't know this, but these seniors in a lot of circumstances have the ability to sell these policies that they no longer want, rather than just letting them lapse. And then maybe there's some cash surrender value they can take out. Often there's not. There's, depending on a number of factors, their age, their health, et cetera, there's actually, there are investors like my company that will buy these policies. And then on the flip side, our clients and the people who invest in our fund are investors who are looking for alternative investments into this asset class.
Okay, so maybe to break it down for the listener, you have a fund of money that you're using to deploy to buy insurance policies that older people feel like they may not need, or maybe they need cash today to kind of live out the rest of their life and there's not enough cash value in it. So you purchase it for some amount less than what their death benefit is, correct?
Correct, less than the face value. And if there is cash surrender value, it's obviously for more than that. Otherwise, they're better off just using the cash surrender value.
Right.
Yeah, and again, people sell for all sorts of reasons. They don't want it anymore, they don't need it anymore. They need the cash, they can't afford it anymore, et cetera.
Yeah, I've seen, being in the insurance business, even though that life insurance is not what I do, I've seen policies that, somebody that may only be 65 didn't know that their policy was going to escalate in cost. They thought it was level for the whole period of time, but if they bought a universal life policy 20 or 30 years ago, now it's jumping up, and they say, look, I was used to paying $5,000 a year for this policy. I can't afford $25,000. What do I do? So this is a very viable option. It can help put money back in the pocket of somebody who really may not need the death benefit anymore.
That's right. And again, rather than just letting it lapse, it's a very good alternative. And you were saying that sometimes the premiums escalate, let's say with universal life, which is really one of the biggest categories of life insurance that qualify for life settlements. It's actually, it's even greater than that. And what I mean is, universal life has this insurance component, and then it has this investment component. That's the way it was sold. That's why it was created. But what's happened is because the market's done so well over the past 10 years or so, people saw the investment part or the cash value part really increase, and then they used that to pay the premiums. And then at some point you run out of cash value, and you forgot that you have these premiums that need to be paid. Now you have a premium due. There's not enough cash value. You're like, wait a second, I don't want to reach back into my pocket for 20, 40, $50,000 to do this. And again, rather than letting it lapse, there's that opportunity to sell it.
Right. So good news for life insurance holders who don't know what to do with these increasing premiums or may not need the policy anymore. They find it as a valuable asset. And on the other side of the fence, you've got an investor group. What do they find compelling about this value proposition?
For certain investors, it's very compelling. Number one, it's an alternative asset where the returns have no correlation with the markets or the economy. And there are very few asset classes that you can say that for. So you can't say that for real estate. You can't say that for commodities or gold. We don't know if you can say that about crypto. So there's very few assets that really have that zero correlation. It's in effect, it's better than a hedge, right? Because a hedge usually goes the opposite direction. This asset class will do what it's going to do independent of other factors. That's number one. Also, there's that certainty of payout. If you buy $1 million of treasuries, for example, and you hold to maturity, you're going to get $1 million at the end. If you buy a policy with $1 million face value and you hold it until that policy is realized, until the person passes away, you're going to get $1 million back. Now, that doesn't mean your return is guaranteed or anything like that, but there's that certainty of payout. Of course, unlike treasuries, they're not as liquid and they don't pay coupon. You actually have to pay premiums. But the returns, can be pretty significant. Our fund is targeting double-digit returns. We feel pretty confident we're gonna achieve that because if you know how to buy and how to underwrite policies and evaluate them, there's some good opportunities out there.
I'm interested. This seems to be outside of the realm of what your experience has been. What made you kind of start up this fund and this business?
It's a great question. Gordon. So about 10 years ago, a friend of mine, and actually he and I had another business together, got into, maybe a little less than 10 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, got into the space. He said, hey, you're familiar with life settlements? I said, no. And, well, it's this and that. And, I'm getting into the business. And I said, cool. And I said, I'm really intrigued. And I was watching him. I was actually kind of giving him advice more from the entrepreneurial side. And I then started to make some personal investments. And those investments did pretty well. And then a few years ago, I really started researching the industry because I was really intrigued. And the one thing that was hanging over my head is demographics. We have an aging population. Baby boomers make up a big part of the population, and that's increasing. Knowing that's going to drive supply, and that really that might be a fuel for the market. And without going into all the details, I found ways to build a better mousetrap. Essentially, there were ways that that the bigger players in the industry are run that I thought could be optimized. The more I looked, the more I liked it. And then I decided, like, hey, there's an opportunity here. I was getting questions from people in my network about, hey, you mentioned something about this life settlement investment. Tell me more about it. How do I get involved? And, being the entrepreneur that I am, I started the business.
You just can't help yourself.
Just can't. Well, I'm not starting any more businesses. And this is now, it's live, it's out there, it's in the universe. I'm not starting any more businesses until, another one exits. And even then I'm not so sure because this is a big opportunity. I'm really spending my time focused on this.
So at the moment, are you looking for investors as well as sellers of life insurance policies?
Yes, we're looking for what's known as qualified investors. There's a certain criteria to meet that, who are looking for alternatives to traditional investments, whether it's replacing, some of their fixed income, and we can't give advice, of course, but whether it's replacing fixed income because of the low yields, or they want to take some of their chips off the table with equities or other alternatives, we're looking for investors. And while we have our supply sources for policies, we are always looking for policies, whether they're appropriate for our fund, and if not, we're happy to refer them over to somebody else where it might be more appropriate.
Got it. And any other characteristics on the investor profile side that you want to share with us?
No, that's it. Again, really just qualified investor. That's a step up over accredited investor, and again, looking for alternatives and looking to explore options.
Great. All right. Anything else you want to talk about with Oasis, or do you want to move on to Work Better Now?
I think we covered it. Let's move on to Work Better Now.
You beat that up pretty good. Okay. So tell us about Work Better Now. What does it do? How did you get into that business? Really interested on that.
Yeah. So another story. I go back maybe 8 years ago, before I sold the New York Enterprise Report. I was walking on the street, and because we had a wide readership, occasionally people would say, "Hey, aren't you the guy from the magazine?" And an entrepreneur whose name I had heard of and I had seen his picture before approached me on the street, said, "Hey, Rob, I'm so and so, and I have an idea that I want to run by you." And I said, "Great. Let's set up a time to talk." He goes, "Well, can you have your assistant contact my assistant?" And I said, I don't have an assistant." And he looked at me like I had four heads. And he goes, "Rob Levin doesn't have an assistant?" He goes, "Look, here's my number. Call me, and I'm going to tell you how this assistant thing works, and then we can talk about this other business idea I have." And I called him, and long story short, within 6 months, I hired a virtual assistant, and it changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. All of a sudden, even though I had a team at the time, I just got all of these administrative and what we call low value tasks, important tasks, but low value tasks off my plate. And I had more time to focus on strategic issues, more time to focus with my family, spending time with my family. It literally changed my life. And over the course of several years, just like you, most of my network is comprised of business owners, and people would interface with my assistant to schedule a meeting or whatever it might be. And they said, "Hey, Rob, what's this? Is this person in your office, and how does it work?" And I would tell them, and then I would refer them to a virtual assistant company. And about 3 years ago, I was on the West Coast. I think I was out there for a business meeting, and a friend of mine from college, Andrew Cohen, met me out there, and he's also in the small business world. And I was telling him about virtual assistants. I was thinking, hey, maybe I'm going to start my own virtual assistant company. He's like, "That's a great idea." I was like, "Well, you want to do it together?" And he said, "Yeah." And of course, we're doing this over a few drinks, and we started Work Better Now. And the premise is very simple. I kind of already mentioned a few of the highlights. We believe that every business owner should have an assistant, and we came up with a way to make it affordable for people to have amazing talent, amazing virtual assistants. And the offering is very simple. You get a full-time dedicated assistant for $1,750 a month. So of course, the next question is, well, how do you do that? Our assistants are from Central and South America. They're very highly vetted. We are accepting 2%. 2% of the people who apply actually get approved. And that number has actually been going down because we have these very stringent standards, get approved to interview with a potential client. Their English skills are amazing. They have amazing attitudes, great experience. And we literally get emails from our clients saying, "This has changed my life." Now, some of our clients use our assistants as a personal assistant like I do. And then some have hired 3 assistants, and they kind of mainstream them into operations, customer support or marketing support, sales support, a variety of different roles. And the business has just been exploding.
That's great. So maybe just build on what tasks are ideally suited for a virtual assistant for people who may be listening to this podcast?
Yeah. So again, let's break them up into two different categories. One is like more of the personal assistant, like my assistant, who will help me with scheduling. And by the way, that alone saves me at least 10 hours a week. And of course, I don't like doing it. That's another thing that business owners need to understand. Business owners should be spending the time on those things that not only drive the most value in the business, things like working on the customer experience, spending time with your team and working with customers, but they should also be spending their time on things they actually enjoy. And I don't know any business owner that likes to spend time scheduling and all the rescheduling that comes along with it. Today I had a change to change. I wanted to make some small changes to the deck that I use for Oasis when I present that to potential investors. My assistant Sergio is able to help me with that, and I don't have to do that. I mean, I may come up with the ideas and maybe what the copy will say, but he can then change the designs and the animations and all of that stuff. I got a doctor's appointment later today. It's a new doctor. I had to fill out a form. I don't want to fill out the form. Sergio fills out the form. He's got access to my credit card information, my insurance information. I'm only scratching the surface. Up on our site at workbetternow.com, we have 56, maybe that number's increased, 56 tasks that your assistant can do. And that's just the personal assistant side. Again, some of our clients have just operationalized the assistance that they're getting from us. And, they're, like I said, they're very talented. They're working in marketing support, customer support, sales support, other operational roles. There's just a wide variety of tasks that they can do.
For a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs or people that even work in law firms or wherever they may be, I would imagine that one of the biggest hurdles is that this person is 3,000 or 4,000 miles away. How do I train them? How do I control it? How do I do all those things? And having had some experiences in this, and again, today, after the pandemic, we've learned that, working from home, virtual work is really not as difficult as we sometimes make it out to be. So can you maybe give us a couple of words or what your advice would be for those people that are kind of sitting on the fence that say, oh, that would never work for me. I need to have somebody right outside my door or something like that. Like, how do you really get to that?
Yeah, well, first of all, as you said, COVID showed everybody that virtual work can be really productive. And since the end of last year, our business is up 300%. And
Wow.
And a lot of that, some of it's due to the economy. A lot of that is due to the fact that people are now comfortable with a virtual environment. So that's the first point. And look, at the end of the day, there are some people out there, and I have some friends that need an in-person executive assistant, and that's a different thing. And look, our belief is that every business owner should have an assistant. Not a virtual assistant is not right for everybody. Some people should have, like I said, an executive assistant, in the room next door. But for most people, particularly ones that haven't had an assistant before, the virtual assistant is a great opportunity to, again, offload those low value tasks so you can focus on those high value tasks. And we have an onboarding program that some of our clients use that gets them started quickly, right? It's really a series of questions that our assistant will ask their new client, essentially their new boss, if you will, that's designed to get tasks off their plate as soon as possible. And then once you get comfortable, you start to realize, wait, this person can help me with this thing and with that thing. And before you know it, your assistant goes from maybe working 10 hours that first week to working, 40 hours a week full, and their plate is full. And before you know it, you might be ready to hire another assistant to help with other members of your team.
Yeah, and you said the monthly cost is $1,750.
$1,750 a month for a full-time dedicated assistant.
And with that, you don't have issues around taxes, workers' comp, benefits, anything
Right.
like that. That's one price, does it all, get you the person. And if somebody said, hey, Rob, I'm interested, how long does it take to get somebody deployed for that client?
It's a great question. We not only screen all of the VAs before we put them in the pool of available VAs to interview with clients, but then we match up what a client specifically is looking for, and maybe some of the attributes, the personality attributes that they're looking for with specific VAs. That process takes anywhere from 3 to 10 days.
Okay. And if a business person today, I'm thinking of like a real estate salesperson who needs a personal assistant because now the market's heating up and they just can't handle everything. How long would it take them to hire a New York-based person to do all those tasks and then have the space to house them and put them somewhere and get them a computer and all that kind of stuff? I mean, you're talking 3 to 10 days. I'm thinking if you were to hire a real worker, meaning not real, but a physical in New York worker, you'd probably be looking at 3 to 10 weeks.
Yeah, and let's also not forget, I don't know if you're seeing this, but we're seeing this at Work Better Now. Now I don't run the day-to-day. Andrew runs the day-to-day. I'm focused on Oasis, but we're trying to hire some people in the States, sales and some, US based people, as well as some people in South and Central America to work on our team. And the job market's tough as an employer. If you're looking to fill roles, it's really, really competitive, and it's taking us a long time to fill some of those roles. We have VAs ready to go. So
that's great.
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that.
So now I'm part of your sales team.
That's right. Thank you.
Or at least your marketing team.
Right.
Well, Rob, it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I got to say, there couldn't be 2 more different types of businesses to be engaged in at the same time. Maybe just how do you do that? I mean, obviously not as a plug for Work Better Now, but having a personal assistant probably helps you stay organized because you've got a variety of things to think about every day.
That's right. Well, Work Better Now, I'm the chairman. I'm not involved in operations. I do a couple of things I do a video series called Working Better Now, just because that's easy for me to do, just based on my experience with the New York Enterprise Report. And I'll participate in strategic issues, but I'm not involved in the day-to-day. Andrew Cohen runs, my partner runs all of that. So I'm able to really spend my time focused on Oasis.
Got it. Any other last comments or thoughts you want to throw on the table while we're still speaking?
That's it. This has been a lot of fun, and I actually got something out of it. I didn't even think about the fact that our people are ready to go, and how that could be a differentiator. This has been a lot of fun. I
enjoy it too. It's always great speaking with good business people who are successful, engaging, want to spread the love, so to speak. If somebody who's listening to this podcast wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Best way to do that is through LinkedIn. All I'll ask is that if you're sending an invite, because I don't accept invites from people I don't know, just mention that that you just mention Gordon, and that'll certainly get my attention. I do check out the invites, and if there's a note there and if there's a reference, I'll accept and work to set up a call.
Awesome. And I'll put in the show notes Rob's contact info on LinkedIn. So if any of the readers or listeners want to see that, that's great. Again, Rob, it's been great chatting with you today. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us. This is Gordon Coyle. I'm the host of the New York Business Leaders Podcast. If this is something you'd be interested in talking to me about and being interviewed for this podcast, give me a call. I'll have my information as well in the show notes and would love to talk to you further. Rob, thanks very much. Great conversation.
Thanks again, Gordon.
You're welcome.
That's it for this week's episode of the New York Business Leaders Podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss next week's episode. In the meantime, find more interviews and resources at nybusinessleaders.com.